Well, if you're game, the way that I like to have these conversations, Alex, is I think, as you know, kind of uncanned. So we can just jump our little boats in the river and go where the current goes. There's so much in your book. I had thought, I'm gonna maybe camp out on this or that chapter, but the chapter headings, I think, could sort of serve as book titles in a lot of cases.
Good, good. I guess it's better than when you read one of those books and you're like, this could have been an article.
Yeah, that's right. This could have been a short pamphlet, please. But if you'll indulge me, there you have this line in your book. Rather than what do you do or where do you work, I like to ask, who are you? So, Alex Amouyel, who are you?
I'm caught at my own game, but thank
Hoisted
you.
on your own petard.
Yeah. And my friend, Dr. Q Hamuri, which I reference in this, will be happy that was one of your favorite lines. Yeah, I mean, I'm French and British, and recently also became a naturalized American citizen. I'm the daughter of Pierre and also of Carol, who and come from a long line of refugees and immigrants from Russia, Algeria, Europe, and around the world, and I'm an immigrant myself. And I think one of the big things that I do see as part of my identity as well in that sense is that I care a lot and I work in social impact, and I guess the last thing to say is I'm an author.
Fantastic. Is that your first book?
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully not my last, although maybe there's a break in between.
Well, for what it's worth, I'll tell you which chapters I think are best candidates for book two.
For expansion,
you,
excellent.
you might go a totally different direction and write something on home heating the traditional way or something.
Yes, yeah.
So for those who will listen to this and don't know, since it can be a little awkward to just blow one's own trumpet for a few bars. Executive director of Solve MIT, that was since 2016 till now. Clinton Global Initiative Director of Program. International Change Manager, International Save the Children Alliance. And BCG, which virtually all our community know. I'd kind of like to take you back to that early vintage, the BCG vintage. You talk about it in the book, and some of the choices that are being made by you, some being made by your colleagues. Can you sort of take us back to that, Alex? And I guess the connection from her, if we could sort of channel her for a sec, and what you wrote.
Sure. So yeah, BCG was the Boston Consulting Group was my first job, proper job, I guess, after my master's. I'd done some work as a scientific researcher and also teaching English in Asia, in fact, in South Korea and mainland China, in between my undergraduate and my master's. But I did a master's in international affairs, and I really wanted to work in human rights at the time. And I did an internship with the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I did an internship with Amnesty International. But long story short, no one would actually pay me more than lunch money, literally sort of lunch money. You got reimbursed your lunch at Amnesty International, to do anything remotely interesting in human rights. And so, I was a little downtrodden that I wasn't hired immediately, but many of my peers at the time were applying to the investment banks and the consulting firms, because I think that's what you do nowadays. Maybe you apply, you want to launch your own startup or or work in venture capital. But at the time, that's what people, my peers did. And so I applied as well, and I was recruited, and they would pay me decently. And the work was pretty interesting. And I did a lot of pharmaceuticals, private equity, and then one of our pro bono clients at BCG was Save the Children. And so I pleaded with the staffing lady to put me on the Save the Children case. And it took a year and a half of pleading and paying my dues in other industries. But then finally I was staffed on that project. And then I did the thing that you're not meant to do, which is ultimately I joined the pro bono clients full time. But it was still really good. So those are back in the day. And I think what was helpful about that is that I did learn a lot of interesting skills and did interesting work, and certainly I think helped me in all my jobs afterwards to in a number of levels.
I think one of the threads that goes through your book and some of what you were just saying about maybe the way you're shaping your own career is impact. I worry a little bit that word is so valuable that it gets really overused and used in all kinds of different contexts. So it ends up, poor little thing ends up carrying a lot of freight. But you've got this whole section which is impact is the measuring stick. So I want people to go and read the book, and that's one of the things that they'll certainly need to take in, and I think some of them will just take it in at face value. But why not happiness? Why not salary? Why not meaning? Why impact? Why is that measuring stick better than the next nearest alternatives?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I think it's a good one, and I think you're right that now impact is brandied around by, all these big corporations and foundations, and recently newly downtrodden crypto exchange fund that shall not be had decided thought that they could do things differently when it came to impact with a philanthropic effective altruism vehicle that also has gone down the drain alongside the crypto exchange. So everyone is using the term in different ways, and at some point I talk about the sort of caricatures of some of the people who play in that space and the sort of the risk with that. But I think I think ultimately when you say happiness, meaning, those can co-locate with, and I hopefully also some dollars that can co-locate with impact, in the sense of really thinking through, for me, it's both the urgency and the size of all these problems. And I summarize it in the book as, injustice, oppression, inequality, and extraction of people and the planet in all its forms. These are just big issues, and the world cannot wait. And when you still have billions of people who live in poverty, don't know where their next meal is coming from, don't know how they're going to, educate their children, and can't weather an economic shock, the problems are really, really urgent. And so both it's sort of this duty and obligation as humanity and as each individual and each human to do something. But also that's what does bring us purpose and meaning and long-term fulfillment. And there's a lot of philosophers and there's a lot of surveys And there's a lot of other people who do talk about that, you know, pursuing dollars for dollars' sake is meaningless, or pursuing material goods, or, you know, again, there are many other philosophers and religious people from from thousands of years and from all cultures, which say that way better than I do. But, you know, finding, you know, our purpose as both individuals and as a collective body of humans is really important, and choosing that metric for by a life well lived and is, I think, what's important. And it's also, and which is why I called the book The Answer Is You, it's also the solution, in the sense that I don't want to leave impact, let's say, to only the current actors in you know, these the multilateral organizations and the old school foundations and the new crypto funds who think they can, you know, I want everyone to get involved, big and small, and I think that is how we're going to solve these problems, is if everyone gets involved.
It's such a cool anthem throughout, Alex, is just taking responsibility for this at the individual level, as opposed to, you know, it's quite easy, perhaps once you have a lot of money, to say, well, you know, there's the tithe over there, so that's got that sorted out and we're done. Or to say, I won't give up something so precious as my time. I'll just give you a little bit of money instead, since I've got tons of that in a finite set of the first. I want people to be able to fast track to a couple of the ideas in there, and one of them relates to this. If they do, then I think what they'll probably do is end up reading the book sort of from the middle out, or, you know, grabbing a chapter and kind of going elsewhere. But one of your ideas is 10%, and I think that has the character of being a little surprising, and then making an absolute ton of sense. So for the uninitiated, can you just sort of talk about what the 10% principle is?
Yeah, and so really it's, you know, asking, because people always ask me, where do I start, you know, and how I want to have more impact in my life, where do I start?
Yeah.
And in the end, my conclusion was, and again, it's taken from other people, but it's sort of start with 10% of your time and money. And that's both a reflection, you know, in various religions, giving 10% of your income is meant to be what you do. And then one of my friends, Patrick J. McGinnis, wrote a book called The 10% Entrepreneur. It's like, don't quit if you want to be an entrepreneur, don't quit your day job, but sort of use 10% of your time for entrepreneurial ventures. So I thought that was, you know, the combination of those two ideas was quite good as to help people how to start. And again, sort of, if you think about 10% of your time, that can be an afternoon on a Saturday or Sunday, another evening. It's not that much time if you can carve it out. And it could be for volunteering, for a side project that is impact, for something that is within your day job that you can, you know, negotiate with your manager or discuss that would be impactful, for a course you might take, for books you might read that help you progress on your impact journey. And then when it comes to your money, it's obviously great if you could donate 10% of your income. At least in America, that number currently stands for the average American at 2.1%, so quite far away. And interestingly, the richer you get, the less you give. So lower income Americans actually do give 8 to 10% of their salary. And I don't know about Asia and Singapore specifically, so apologies for that. But but you know, you can think of your money both in terms of your giving charitable donations, but also in terms of your investing and sort of thinking about impact investing and other things, and also about your purchasing decisions. First, buying less, but also buying it more locally, sustainably, socially conscious, and etc. And so I sort of go through various ways that you can start. And I guess the other thing to really think about, and this is actually sort of even starting 10%, is to map and audit all the levers of power and influence you have in your life. So indeed, your career and your job, your money, your family relationships, the institutions that you might be part of, that you could influence, and rating those, if you will, and thinking through those and seeing where that power and then where that 10% can sort of start to come from. And hopefully, you know, that 10% becomes 20%, becomes 30%, and more you're moving your life into that impact, more and more impactful sectors. And I quote a couple of, because in the book I use stories and different stories of different people.
Yeah.
But a number of them, and for example, I'm thinking of Isis Booz, who's a lawyer and who started, you know, volunteering and doing small consulting projects for social entrepreneurs sort of on the side. And then now she, you know, then that helped her get the job she has now, which is devoted to a legal foundation that supports that gives free legal advice to nonprofits and social entrepreneurs worldwide. And so, you know, that sort of devoting that 10% can become ultimately a full-time job or things like that, depending on what you want to do.
How often are you, when people read the book, I know it's not like it's been out for 10 years, it's still fresh, but when they read it, have you seen any patterns in the readership? Are there a lot of people sort of in the first 5 years of career that are engaging you?
I think I assumed that when I started writing the book, and also because when you look at the surveys of Gen Zers and millennials and their commitment to impact and to climate change and other things like that, sort of, it's the obvious readership. But I definitely have received a few messages, and they don't go, "This is my age," and et cetera, but
Sure.
you know, I've definitely both had people join book talks and people who are who, you know, are probably nearing retirement and everything in between. I also think that there's a lot of people, I guess, in the middle of their careers who, you know, having established themselves, probably thinking, hey, how can this is not as fulfilling as I want it to be on some level. What else can I do? And how can I reorient myself in various ways? So I hope it's sort of valuable for many people, but let's see.
Yeah, I think I'm just recalling now, I believe there's actually at least a paragraph or two where you're talking about the, you know, how this plugs into some different seasons of professional life. But I know where it is actually. When you're talking about superpowers, one of the things that you're addressing is experience, and I sense that some of our community that will get a hold of your book will need to know that kind of upfront. Otherwise, superpowers just sounds like optimistically naive. It sounds way too sunny skies and cheerleadery. If you miss that section where you address the fact that, look, of course you gain certain superpowers, or they use, you know, make them superpowers with additional experience, but there's still a way to kind of track down what you've dubbed superpowers. Can I just get you to like riff on that word and that
Yeah,
idea?
absolutely. I mean, I could have said your skills and experience
Yes.
and your lived experience and everything that makes you you, but indeed I thought it was more fun to think about superpowers in what makes you unique. And there is somewhere I go a little bit too geeky into the superhero analogy where I'm contrasting, you know, this vision of the lone superhero and these sort of, you know, hero social entrepreneurs. You see some of the famous ones, and you're, you know, like, I don't know, Greta Thunberg or Malala, and they're not like one lone individual that are indeed different than you or me or anybody else. And so everybody is not a superhero. I would say the superhero is the collective, but everybody does have superpowers and things that make them unique. And rather than sort of, you know, the first thing to do, which does come from the beginning of that chapter, from a quote from Rumi, is, yesterday I was young, I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. So, and that sort of is a quote that's, I think, extremely powerful and was said some 700 years ago. But it's both about, don't start with the problem or the solution or dive right in, but start with yourself and understanding yourself and what you can bring to the problem solving table and what makes you unique. And that doesn't mean 30 years of experience necessarily in banking or in lawyering or in being an international aid worker. It could be a lot of different things. And it could be also your lived experience and how you grew up and what challenges you had to overcome as a child or young adult or whatever it is. But sort of know yourself, I guess, which again has been said.
Alex, you're drawing on like all you're drawing on all this wisdom that's like minimum five
And nothing
centuries
is new.
old, and in other
Yes,
cases a couple
exactly. Nothing
millennia.
is, but you know, is anything new, right? Is any, people have been asking themselves since the dawn of time the meaning of life, and to some
Correct.
extent, this is still about that. But so you know, you have that, and I think it anchors that quote from Rumi. Also, I think anchors, in fact, the end of the book, which is about which is chapter 9, which I wrote as much for myself as anybody else, which is about investing in yourself and you really thinking through how you manage, you know, the emotional labor and your mental health and how you sustain yourself and continue to learn as you go through this. Because it is also a very hard and difficult journey. And, you know, as much as there's optimism and various other things, it's sort of not easy to keep going sometimes. So yeah, so I think superpowers is this optimistic word, but it is recognizing that each of us is unique and has something to bring to that table. And just like all superhero movies, in the end, they realize they all have to bandy together and work with their frenemies to get anything done. And that's like the point of every Marvel
Yes.
movie ever. So I think it sort of works as well in that way.
So I actually want to pick up on that. There were one or two ideas I thought let's have a little kind of wrestle with them. The Marvel movie notion that you just came up with. You could imagine, say 10 youngsters with superpowers and a ton of runway ahead of them get a hold of this book. And they go, fantastic. I'm going to do it. I'm going to actually go heavy praxis here. I'm going to take these ideas and I'm going to go into the world and do them. And they end up, because of that, on opposite lines of a sort of notional battlefield. So I don't know, maybe let's leave aside like the really kind of classic and contentious ones. Oh, here's one. You know, nuclear power. Some people are like, we got to do it. We've got to do that, and others no. And so you could see a couple of these characters I've just invented, finding their North Star with a little bit of time and reflection, going, I want to take Alex's advice. I'm going to start with 10% and I'm going to gear that up and I'm going to identify my superpowers. And one of them is championing nuclear power because of what they want the world to be like. And the other one is opposing it. Is there, what do you make?
That's a good question. That happened. Nuclear power happened in Europe when I was growing up. The debate on nuclear power happened when I was growing up. I grew up in France, and we used to have adverts on TV, which was like, there would be a small child and the train is like, Daddy, Daddy, my train is electric. And the train would be like, you know, advancing itself. And the daddy would be like, no, your train is nuclear. And then like, did you know French electricity, 80% of your electricity is nuclear? And then the Germans on the other side of the border would be, along with, you know, a number of environmental NGOs would be protesting nuclear power development and various other things. You know, I don't know that there's but it's a good example, but you could say different education, like different approaches to education and different, it's not to say that there's always I mean, there are right or wrong answers, and there are things that are correct, and I think generally I'm pro nuclear power, but we can, you know, I'm happy to have that debate, and I wouldn't also say that I am the expert in this, but I think that it is, you know, the approach to problem solving and the approach that I recommend in the book, notably, you know, when you get to chapter 6, 7, and 8, is not to just go it alone and say nuclear power is the answer. I'm going to go do this. And I don't know how you would go and build a nuclear power plant all by yourself anyway. But it is about engaging with community, with the communities of those people most affected, and working through problems together and figuring out how to work these. So hopefully people, you know, come to, it's through the practice of problem solving and how you co-design things and how you work together that you come to a conclusion that works for a whole community or a whole country or the world. Now, obviously, nuclear power is an interesting one because, let's say, yes, if you're it has consequences like across the world, but let's say if something went wrong, and but in general, I think through the policies and debate, and you know what we're seeing now in Europe suffering from a lack of energy due to geopolitical concerns and other things, is probably that nuclear energy is better than a number of, and hasn't yet been replaced by other things, such as we're not yet on nuclear fusion or or enough battery storage to make solar and wind viable alternatives to gas and other things that Europe is relying on.
Yeah. Okay, so that's actually, I'm really glad that we came across that, because I think that's maybe a valuable asterisk on that section, which is, if I've caught you right, it isn't simply about sprinting out there on your own because you've self-reflected long enough and going, it's all about me. You know, the word "you" is quite large on the cover.
Plural, yeah,
Right.
yes,
But,
indeed.
But that you can also imply that you're sort of you're in a setting. There are other yous hanging around. You need to sort of convene and align with others.
Well, I guess that in the English language, you is both singular and the plural. So it's
right,
which is not the case in all languages. But yes, I think that thinking through your individual role, but also your collective role is extremely important, and indeed that your again, I am not the expert on renewable energy and nuclear energy. So whatever I've just said, I'm sure there's a number of people who would know a lot more than I do. And hopefully that, debate and constructive policy making and problem solving is what we need. But
well, something that gave me some great tingles was that as reading your book in preparation to speak with you, was the idea that humanity has such an unbelievable array of enthusiasms and motivations. So somebody's going to read this and just the whole time they're going to be thinking of burrowing owl conservation. Right?
excellent. Yep.
That is what they're into. And they're just like, not enough people know about it. We really got to raise awareness. If there's a number one issue in my life, it's those burrowing owls. Like, thank God that we're not all given the exact same, sort of North Star to orient us.
Yeah, but I do, and I do not know about burrowing owls, so that you're definitely out of my depth there. But I think that there are still a lot of intersections, right? Because I'm spinning out of here, but burrowing owls, even if somebody is super narrowly focused on that, that will intersect with forest conservation and management and, habitat conservation and biodiversity, which also intersects with indigenous people's rights, because actually biodiversity is 80% of the remaining biodiversity is controlled by 20% in 20% of the lands, which primarily still are in the hands of indigenous peoples. It's also about women's rights. And so I think even if your topic is burrowing owls, you can find both, you can go and find all the other people who are interested in burrowing owls, and have experience in that and have motivation to help. But also there'll be a number of issues around that can complement what you're doing in ways that are helpful. So, but that's the beauty of this world. And whether you're a lawyer or documentary filmmaker or not a marine biologist, sorry, a biologist or other things, if you care about burrowing owls, you can't just have people who have PhDs in biology working on that. You probably also need lawyers and filmmakers and another people to rally up the cause. So that's what I think is really interesting. It's both the issues and that sort of this purpose matrix, but it's like finding the problems that really resonate with what you care about, but also going back to those superpowers and your skills and experience and where you can add value to those problems and help contribute to solving them.
Let's tackle a related issue then, which I suspect some folks will feel. I'll see if I can characterize it. I'll characterize it as the devil's advocate here. This lady, Alex, has come along and basically run down and denigrated the commonplace work of just the average Joe. I edit documents. Okay, it's not glamorous and there's not much I can do about it. And I'm sorry I don't edit them for, saving children in Africa initiatives. I edit them for, real estate transactions or something. But look, A, it pays the bills, and B, if those documents don't get edited, a cascade of silly and unnecessary problems happens in the world. And I'm not alone. There's someone else who, tightens the lug nuts over here, and there's somebody else that, trucks the potato chips from the factory over to where they can be purchased. And, we're all just a band of folks in the world doing the thing that needs to get done. And I don't have, if I try to measure impact and everybody does, no potato chips will get anywhere, no lug nuts will get tightened, and all the documents will be unedited.
Okay, so first of all, I do say, and I guess the audience, which is going to be buying this book or listening to this podcast still has the choice to some extent with what they do with their working hours. So first, I don't want to denigrate, billions of people on this planet who still do not have the choice with what they do with their working hours for various reasons, but who either in the country I'm currently residing in the United States, may be holding 2 or 3 jobs down to make ends meet and put their kids through school, or in other countries maybe subsisting on in various ways. So not everybody has the choice with what they do with their waking hours, and that is I don't want to denigrate that or say that's the opportunity that you have. But when you do have the choice, and at least I guess it says start with 10%, so at least 10% of your time you have the choice, and if you can do more, and if you're seeking purpose and fulfillment and meaning, then hopefully that is the book for you. And I think editing documents for real estate transactions, many people, again, I'm using the reference of the US, wealth building in this country is primarily created through home ownership. That is a potentially very impactful thing that you can do, even without changing jobs. Now, taking to the extreme, if you're editing real estate documents to expropriate low-income Americans from their homes on the technicality, I don't know, you can do it for, and that you have to judge who you're working for and what type of real estate editing you're doing, and if you're working, and it's not that there's always good guys and bad guys, but going back to superheroes and various things, but there's ways that your day job can be really positively impactful, and others where it can be neutral, and others where it can be harmful and negative in various ways. And again, it's not to say that everybody, even if you say, okay, I'm working for the guys who are trying to screw the smaller guys out of their, businesses and their homes, and I'm, it makes me icky, but I have to pay the bills. I think that's all, I don't want to denigrate that either. It's just, obviously, it's icky because that's what you're saying. And then how do you try, and can you stay in your job and influence it in a positive way? Or can you find another job, or can you increase that percentage of positive impact, and can you start moving the needle? And I think that is a big question often, because say you work for a big corporation, and let's just say for, it's a big bank, or it's a financial institution, the picture will be probably, murky. It's like they're providing an essential service to a number of retail customers, but then maybe, some of the banks in the US have been called out for discriminating against Black and Indigenous and brown people in this country. But you might be working for the division which is doing interesting impact investing products, or you might be working in the division which is about foreclosures, and thinking about, the place that you are within, let's say, this big corporate institution, and how you can influence it might be, but maybe you could have more influence if you're in the foreclosure department, and if you help people renegotiate their loans and reduce the number of foreclosures so that is a nuanced conversation, I guess, with yourself and your family and your employers to figure out where you can have the most influence. And it's not always, maybe sometimes we need the environmentalists to go and work for oil corporations if we're going to help them change their ways as well. But so it's not, I don't want to say everybody has to quit and go and work for an environmental NGO, and that's, everybody else is bad. That's definitely not the book. It's where can you move the needle in your life around the impact, and therefore move the needle in your community and in the world, and where do you have influence? And it's not, sometimes your biggest lever for influence is not quitting your job either.
Super. You made me glad I asked you that. I debated like, hey, is it prickly to like try to poke holes in a book? But and
it's fine. Not everybody is gonna. I'm not saying I wrote the be all and end all book, and that there's everything is I'm happy to debate things, and maybe one day if there's a second edition, and I'm sure there'll be some revisions too. And as I've learned, learning while I'm interacting with readers and different people, I'm learning a lot as well about their lives and various things. So
we made a commitment a couple of years ago to read a lot of classics, in part, Alex, because our function is to build academies for organizations. Usually they have to be small enough that they can't just afford to go build their own academy. So that's sort of our raison d'etre. And the classics still hold so many of the best lessons. I mean, people don't think like, oh, what we really need to do around here is get a couple of copies of Tacitus in and just read some old Roman rhetoric or something. But boy, is there ever several layers of concrete in the foundation of your core idea here that comes out of the classics. We did reference it. I mean, you had like a Plato reference and Rumi, and obviously things like the 10% have very old and established grounding. But I just think throughout the core thesis here is kind of a calling that our various ancestors, you can almost go to any culture, have addressed.
And I think I quote, I also quote a quote at least attributed to Rabbi Hillel as well. I'm trying to quote from different cultures, but interestingly, or perhaps is not all cultures are written. There are oral traditions among indigenous communities and different things, and also the voice of women hasn't always been quoted throughout history as proportionately as men. So I was trying to quote from current and past and things, but yes, some of the remaining written word is a little bit disproportionately, and that's obviously my education as well, but disproportionately probably Western rather than Eastern or indigenous, but still I think all cultures do have a lot of these interrogations about why are we on this earth, and what is our purpose, and how can we better humanity. How do we become better humans ourselves, right?
Yes. The two when you just mentioned women voices, the two books of the Bible that have women superheroes and are named for them are literally like, you could just cut and paste examples of somebody saying, I have to make a choice for what matters to me and stick my neck out and do something different. And Ruth and Esther. Yeah. I mean, they're just like perfect illustrations of your concept here. Okay, I want to make sure that we give people some easy wayfinding. So there's the book. Forgive me if it renders a little funny here, just because I'm on a blur background, but that's the title there. How should people, Alex, not only track the book down, but if they want to get in touch with you, if they want you to speak or read other things you're writing, or just follow what you're up to, how would you direct them?
Thank you for asking. So you can purchase the book on many platforms, both the typical ones such as Amazon and a number of independent publishers. My publisher is mango.bz. They have a 30% sale going on until
Great.
January 31st if you want to go there, but also independent like bookshop.org and that type of thing. I suspect internationally, if a lot of your readership is in Asia, Amazon might be easier for some to track down than for some of them. But I just want to put it out there. You can, I publish a newsletter and I have a website, which is called yourimpactlife.com, and which has other musings around impact, as well a lot about the book in there. So yourimpactlife.com. And then probably LinkedIn, because I'm not really on Twitter much these days. If people want to get in touch, but also my email through this is alex@yourimpactlife.com. And people have written to me from the book. And then if you like the book, including yourself, do write a review e.g. on Amazon and other things. That helps a lot for budding authors and yeah.
I will just cheerlead here as well and say the reader that you chose for the Audible version has a great voice and a super cadence and did a superb job. So for the
good. I'm happy.
By Audible, it's a good recording.
Oh, well, I'm so happy because believe it or not, that was like a difficult decision. Like it's a very, and nobody's yet commented or asked about that, but the choosing someone to represent, you want someone which sounds a bit like you but isn't quite you, and so
Yes.
so
she does sound like you, actually.
Yeah, no, and she's I think Canadian originally, but anyway, but you get sent lots of little voices as excerpts, and yeah, so trying to figure out which one is most representative is interesting.
Super. Alex, thanks very much. It's late there. Have a great evening, and
thank you for having me.